After years of silence, retired Captain Lenora Hale returns to a forgotten desert base to stop the erasure of a classified mission and the 5 soldiers who died during it. Armed with forbidden files and a defiant resolve, she challenges the very system that buried their legacy. As old scars resurface and secret truths come to light, Hale becomes the last living archive of a story the world was never meant to know. Welcome to my channel. You ever feel the desert hold its breath? That's what hit me the moment I stepped onto the dusty outskirts of Fort Danton, a half-forgotten military base nestled just south of Yuma, Arizona. July heat shimmered off the pavement like ghosts rising from the ground. It had been 6 years since I last saw this place, but the air still smelled the same: burnt jet fuel and sand-cooked rubber. I walked up to the main gate, wearing jeans, a plain white tee, and my old hiking boots. To the soldiers stationed there, I probably looked like somebody's aunt showing up unannounced. I knew what they saw: a woman past 40 with a slight limp and a stitched duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Nothing about me screamed, "Clearance." "Sorry, ma'am, this area is restricted. Gonna need you to step back," one of the young security guards barked. He looked barely out of high school. Tight jaw, regulation fade, and the kind of nervous confidence that comes from memorizing protocol, not living through it. I didn't respond. He looked me up and down, then gestured to his partner. "Probably just another civilian trying to make trouble," he muttered. That one got me. I clenched my jaw, reminded myself to breathe. Then I reached down slowly and unclipped the battered ID card from my belt loop. It wasn't much to look at: scratched plastic, edges curled from years of heat and rain. But right in the center, embedded beneath the photo that barely looked like me anymore, was a dull gray emblem. Not silver, not gold. Titanium, shaped like a crescent shield and etched with one word: Covenant. The boy leaned in and froze. He knew what it was. Every soldier with clearance above level 3 did. You didn't earn that insignia, you survived it. Only 9 were ever issued. I was one of them, the only one still walking. He stepped back like I'd pulled a weapon. His voice cracked when he turned to his comm. Base command, we've got a Covenant marker at Checkpoint Alpha. I repeat, Covenant present at Alpha." The air changed. I didn't have to say a word. Gates opened. Radios went silent. One of the soldiers actually saluted, though he didn't even know my name. I walked through without a glance back. They say real power doesn't need noise, doesn't need permission. It just arrives, and everything else rearranges itself. That's what it felt like. But I wasn't here for respect. I was here because they were closing the books on Operation Covenant. 6 years ago, they labeled our final mission a critical systems failure. No press release, no debrief, just a line item buried in a classified archive and 5 empty chairs that never made it home. They were burying our ghosts under protocol. I wasn't about to let that happen. Fort Danton hadn't changed much. Same concrete barracks, same red warning signs pinned to chain-link fences, same cracked sidewalks bleached white by the desert sun. But it felt smaller now, like the place had shrunk in my absence. Or maybe I had outgrown it. The building ahead used to be a classified strategy center. Now, a sign above the door read, "Resource Allocation Office." Bureaucracy had moved in where bravery used to live. I headed there first. A young officer, maybe 25, trying hard to look older, intercepted me at the top of the steps. "Ma'am," he said sharply, "this facility is off limits. I don't care what story you've been told or what favors you're calling in. You're not on the roster." Behind him, a couple of soldiers stood beside a stack of crates. One of them laughed quietly. "Bet she's just an old analyst come to cause trouble. Probably someone's former CO who thinks she still has pull." I heard every word. Didn't flinch. I unhooked my badge again and handed it to the officer. He didn't even look at it right away. Too busy puffing up, trying to stand tall. Then his eyes dropped to the titanium emblem. The color drained from his face. "You're," he stammered, then caught himself. Give me a second." He turned on his heel and jogged inside. Moments later, a senior officer in a Navy dress uniform stepped out. Colonel Amos Greaves. I hadn't seen him since before everything went sideways. He studied me, eyes landing on the faded scar just above my brow. He didn't salute, just nodded. "Captain Lenora Hale," he said slowly, as if tasting the name. "We thought you were off-grid." "Guess I'm not," I replied. We stood in silence for a long beat. Then he opened the door and gestured for me to follow. No formalities, no small talk, Just quiet understanding between two people who had seen what they weren't supposed to and lived with it anyway. Inside, the air conditioning buzzed low, humming over voices in a nearby conference room. I heard a phrase I hadn't heard in years: code purging and memorial obfuscation. Translation: erasing everything we did. You came on the worst day, Greaves said, almost apologetically. They're finalizing the redaction reports. Operation Covenant's being scrubbed from active legacy files. Buried in level 7 cryptospace. No names. No medals. Just a classification code that won't mean a thing to anyone in 5 years. I stopped walking. And the dead? Greaves looked away. Unlisted. Collateral. 5 people. 5 brilliant, reckless, unstoppable people. My people. Gone. Then I'm here just in time, I said. He frowned. To do what? I reached into my duffel bag and pulled out an old tactical folder, sealed in weathered carbon fiber casing. I laid it on his desk and flipped it open. Inside, mission logs, handwritten maps, field notes. Real documentation. Nothing digital. Nothing they could delete with a keystroke. At the very top was a photograph, 6 of us in desert fatigues, dirt-streaked and grinning like idiots in front of a scorched convoy truck. I've kept everything, I told him. Every op. Every debrief. Every last name they're about to forget. He looked stunned. This is enough to get someone court-martialed. Good, I said. Start with me. Colonel Greaves didn't touch the file. He just stared at it like it was a snake coiled on his desk. You're not supposed to have any of this, he muttered. These reports were purged. I leaned forward. They were encrypted, not destroyed. I rebuilt the logs from the mission backups I wasn't supposed to have. Back when I still trusted someone would want the truth. Greaves sat down slowly. His shoulders, broad and rigid with authority, seemed to sag a little. You're not the only one who kept pieces, Hale, he said quietly. But nobody's been brave or reckless enough to bring it back here. I let the silence hang. 5 people died, I finally said. And today, they're about to be wiped off record like they never existed. You think I came here for closure? No, he said. You came here for war. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Greaves stood and walked to the window. Beyond the blinds, a trio of young cadets marched across the courtyard, their uniforms crisp, their movements sharp. They had no idea they were training on the bones of a ghost operation. I fought for that mission to be classified as tactically unresolved, Greaves said. I argued for a black file instead of a redaction. I was overruled. By whom? He glanced back. People who were never within 100 miles of the dust storm we crawled through. Bureaucrats with enough medals to fill a closet and not one scar. I stepped toward the desk. Then it's time to let the truth surface. Quietly, but fully. He looked at me with something between admiration and sorrow. They won't let you testify. Not formally. You'll be ignored at best. Sanctioned at worst. I nodded. But they can't stop me from speaking off record. From archiving. From remembering. Greaves hesitated, then opened a drawer, pulled out a heavy lockbox, and keyed in a code. The lid creaked as it opened, revealing a small drive and a rolled-up patch. He handed them to me. The patch was cloth, deep navy, embroidered with our unit's real designation, Task Force Red Mark, and a silver falcon with torn wings. Our unit was never supposed to have existed. That patch had been burned from every official record. Until now. I kept this, Greaves said, to remember what kind of leader you were. I turned the patch over. My name was stitched faintly in the border. In the drive. He exhaled. It has what's left of the mission audio logs. Fractured, but real. They tried to destroy the servers. I salvaged what I could. I took both items and slipped them into my duffel. You're not just a ghost, he said, almost reverently. You're the last living archive. No, I said. I'm just the only one still stubborn enough to walk through the front door. I turned toward the hallway. Where's the meeting? He pointed down the corridor. Room Delta 4. And the people in that room, do they know what they're about to erase? They know numbers, he said. Not names. Then I'll give them some. I stood outside room Delta 4 for 10 full seconds before knocking. The door was solid steel, marked only by a placard that read Logistics and Legacy Oversight. The knock echoed, sharp and hollow. A voice from inside called out, "Enter." The room was sterile, white walls, polished metal table, and a long panel of men and women in uniform or crisp suits. A Defense Department flag drooped in the corner. No one stood to greet me. At the center of the table sat a woman with hard eyes and a voice like cracked ice. Deputy Director Lane Worthing, head of the Archival Declassification Board. She glanced at her notes, not at me. Name? She asked. Captain Lenora Hale. Retired. A pause. A flicker of recognition. You're not on the agenda, she said flatly. I walked to the center of the room and dropped the carbon fiber folder onto the table. It hit with a solid thud. I'm here anyway. A younger officer, probably Army intelligence, leaned in. Ma'am, this is a private committee hearing. You're not authorized to present evidence. I looked around at them, all of them. 5 people are about to be erased from your records because someone upstairs doesn't want to deal with the fallout of Operation Covenant. So you'll forgive me if I don't care what your agenda says. Worthing folded her hands, intrigued now. You're referring to Task Force Redmark. The air got thinner. You know the name? I asked. I know of it, she said. That designation was discontinued after the incident. The incident was a sabotage, I said. Our extraction was compromised by internal interference. We lost comms, backup, and 2 inbound transports. We lost 5 of our own. The room was still. No one denied it. But no one affirmed it either. You claim to have corroborating documents, Worthing said. I nodded. Mission logs. Audio from Black Site 9. Debrief notes from Captain Mendez, written 36 hours before he died in the desert. All of it cross-verified. All of it buried. A silence followed. Then the older man beside Worthing, gray hair, navy pin on his lapel, spoke. And what exactly are you asking for, Captain? Recognition, I said. I don't want their names released to the press. I know how this works. But I want them acknowledged in the classified ledger. No redactions. No mission failure label. And I want those 5 names added to the Covenant roll. He blinked. That roll hasn't been updated in years. Then start again. Another pause. You realize, Worthing said, if we validate your request, the implications extend far beyond one mission. Command decisions will be scrutinized. Funding lines reevaluated. You could unravel 6 years of classified narrative. I met her eyes. Maybe that's the price of truth. The room fell into a long, quiet tension. Finally, Worthing leaned back in her chair. Step outside, Captain. I turned and walked out the way I came. They weren't dismissing me. They were deliberating. And if I knew anything from the old days, it was this. When a room full of power goes quiet, that's when the real decisions get made. I sat on a steel bench outside the door, closed my eyes, and waited. I waited 17 minutes, just long enough for doubt to start whispering in my ear. Then the door creaked open. Colonel Greaves stepped out. No expression on his face. Just that careful, unreadable look men wear when they've sat through too many closed-door sessions and come out carrying more weight than answers. They're adding the names, he said quietly. Conditionally. I stood. Conditionally. They'll be listed under Covenant Designation Omega. It means full internal acknowledgement, but locked to top-tier clearance. The official record will say the operation was unresolved due to hostile interference. But the ledger will carry their names. I exhaled slowly. I wasn't asking for parades. Just truth. And the mission logs? I asked. The documents? Archived in the Black Vault. Secured under independent audit. You'll be listed as their custodian. I looked up at him. Custodian. He nodded. You're the one who remembered them, Lenora. The one who refused to let them disappear. That counts. I took the folder from the bench and clutched it tighter than I meant to. They were more than entries in a database. They were people. Specialists. Human shields. Ghosts who volunteered for the silence. I know, he said. We walked out into the sunlight. The wind had picked up, tossing sand across the base road. The horizon shimmered in the distance, making everything ahead look slightly unreal. As we passed the memorial courtyard, I paused. It was modest, polished granite blocks etched with unit insignias and names. None of ours were there. Not yet. Greaves noticed. I'll speak to the base commander, he said. See if we can install a private plaque inside the hangar archives. Doesn't have to be public, I replied. Just visible. He gave a quiet nod. Back at my rental truck, I tossed the duffel into the passenger seat. The patch Greaves had given me earlier was still warm from my hand. I looked at it for a long time before pressing it flat against the dashboard. As I started the engine, I felt the weight in my chest shift. Not lighter, just more evenly distributed. Before pulling out, I looked back one last time. Fort Danton behind me. The road ahead empty and wide. And somewhere in the records now, buried deep, locked down, but alive, were the names of 5 people who didn't ask to be remembered, but deserved it anyway. 3 days later, I was back in Denver. My apartment sits above a half-dead bookstore with squeaky floors and a view of the alley where pigeons outnumber pedestrians. It's not much, but it's quiet, and it keeps the past from knocking too loud. That morning, I received a package delivered by hand. No return address, just a black envelope tucked into the tape. Inside the box was a hard drive, a pair of black gloves, and a letter on Defense Department stationery. For Captain Lenora Hale, authorization confirmed. Covenant Omega Archive access approved. Custodial rights acknowledged. They'd given me guardianship of the records. Not because they trusted me, but because no one else wanted the burden. I cleared the table and powered up the drive. Password prompts. Biometric scans. Layer after layer of digital barbed wire until the main directory opened. There they were. Each folder tagged with a name. Mendez, Alvarez, Cho, Riggins, West. I hadn't spoken their names aloud in 6 years. Seeing them now felt like running a hand across old scars, healed but raised, reminders of stories only I still told. Each folder contained footage, logs, comms chatter. Cho's last transmission. A cracked whisper. If anyone hears this, tell my sister I went laughing. Riggins had left a field memo in a utility notebook, scanned and stored. If this op goes sideways, just know I went willingly. Some things are worth disappearing for. I read each file, slow. I didn't skip the hard parts. Then I uploaded them to a backup drive, encoded them in a hidden cloud vault with a fail-safe protocol. If anything ever happened to me, the files would be sent anonymously to one person. A reporter I trusted. The kind who still asked the right questions. I didn't plan to use it, but I wasn't going to let them vanish twice. That night, I returned to the drive one last time. At the bottom was a 6th folder. No label, just a date. July 18th, 2019. The night we lost them. It was a recording. Fuzzy at first. Wind. Heavy breathing. Gunfire in the distance. Then my own voice. Low. Shaky. This is Hale. Final log. If you're hearing this, red mark is down. We were ambushed. Internal channels rerouted. Extraction sabotaged. We were sold out from the inside. My throat closed listening to it. I remembered the heat, the sand, the screams and the static. I remembered how I'd climbed out of that canyon with a broken rib and Cho's comm unit strapped to my chest. I remembered the silence that followed. They should have died unknown, but I wasn't letting that stand. And now, someone in Washington had signed a paper that made it official. They existed. They mattered. They were remembered. 2 weeks passed. Then my phone buzzed with a message from a number I hadn't seen in 6 years. Heard you stirred the pot, Hale. Mind if I stop by? Bright. Sergeant Sasha Bright, our comm specialist. She'd been reassigned stateside just a week before that final Covenant op. She'd survived the fallout because she wasn't there when it burned. I hadn't heard from her since the funeral that never happened. I texted her the address. 3 hours later, she pulled up in a dusty gray pickup. Same combat boots. Same steel in her eyes. We didn't hug. Just stood on my porch for a second, letting the shared memory wash over us like the blast radius of an old grenade. Some friendships don't need warm greetings. They just resume. Got something to show you, I said. Inside, I booted up the drive. She didn't speak as she watched the folders load. When she saw the names, her jaw clenched. Her fingers tapped her thigh in the same rhythm she used to drum against her radio case when nervous. They added them, she whispered. You really got them to do it. I didn't ask, I said. I showed up and didn't leave. We opened Alvarez's folder first. His last aerial drone feed. Still shaky, still heartbreaking. Then Cho's log. Then Riggins' black box. Sasha sat through it all, unmoving. When we reached the final file, the one with my own voice, she placed a hand on my shoulder. Not for comfort. For grounding. You should have told me, she said. You were living your life, I replied. I didn't want to drag you back into it. I was already in it. Just waiting for someone to say their names again. We stayed up until after midnight going through everything. The audio logs. The decrypted memos. The images from the canyon. And when it was done, Sasha pulled a small notebook from her jacket, leather-bound and worn at the edges. I've been keeping this, she said. Letters. Notes. Stuff I didn't know where to send. She flipped to a page. It was a message to Mendez, dated 2 months after the op short. Raw. Just 8 words. You kept the line. We didn't forget you. She left the notebook with me. Said she was heading back to Texas in the morning, but she wanted the stories to stay here, with the rest. I'll be back, she said. Next time, I'll bring the others. The ones still breathing. As she drove away, I looked at the pile on my table. The folder. The notebook. The patch. The drive. A makeshift memorial no one would ever visit, but one I'd keep alive. For them. For us. For anyone who ever wondered if silent heroes stayed silent forever. The following month, I got an unexpected call from Fort Danton's base administrator. They were opening a classified instruction unit inside the War College Annex, designed for intelligence cadets and junior officers entering shadow operations training. Real-world case studies. Non-traditional warfare. Ghost files. And they wanted me to speak. Not officially, the administrator clarified, but off the record. As someone who's walked that line, I said yes without hesitation. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of 30 young faces in a secured lecture hall with no windows. The kind of room where time stands still, and every word is recorded, yet never leaves the building. No rank insignias. No formal introductions. I just said, "My name is Lenora Hale. I led Task Force Redmark." A murmur swept through the room. Some had heard whispers. Some recognized the name from legacy security drills. But most just stared curious, skeptical, maybe both. I told them about Covenant. Not the sanitized version. The real one. How we'd operated beyond maps. How we navigated airfields with no coordinates. How we lost people whose families never got flags, just silence. And I told them why I'd fought to bring their names back. Near the end, a cadet in the third row raised her hand. "Captain Hale, how do you know when a mission's worth becoming a ghost for?" The room held its breath. I thought for a moment, then said, "You don't. But you go anyway. Because someone has to." I walked over to the display case in the corner. Inside, protected by armored glass, were a few artifacts they'd assembled since the records had reopened. A spare Redmark patch. A laminated field photo. A folded piece of Cho's torn notebook. On the pedestal read only one line. "For those who served without a shadow and still left one behind." I looked at the cadet again. "You don't always get closure," I said. "But if you're lucky, you get to remember. And be remembered." When the session ended, no one applauded. They just stood quietly. And that silence? That was respect. The kind that doesn't need ceremony. I keep a wall in my apartment that no one else sees. Not hidden, just private. It's covered in small mementos, each one from a moment the world never knew existed. A folded ration wrapper with Riggins' handwriting on it. A tiny circuit board Cho modified in the field to boost signal. A desert rock from Mendez's last patrol. A torn sleeve patch from Alvarez's spare fatigues. And in the center, a black and white photo of the six of us, smiling in the dry heat of somewhere that technically didn't exist. Beneath it, I'd mounted a strip of etched metal. No title. No date. Just 5 names. Sometimes I catch myself reciting them when I'm alone. Like a prayer, or a roll call I'm still hoping they'll answer. There's power in saying names that no longer echo in official records. They weren't flawless. They made mistakes. They laughed too loud. They cursed too often. But when things went wrong, they stood their ground. They gave everything. And until someone else says their names, I'll keep doing it. Every time I walk past that wall. Every time I speak to a class. Every time I open the file and reread the logs, just to make sure I didn't miss anything. Truth is, I still feel like I failed them. I was the one who came home. The one who got to walk away. But maybe carrying their memory, carrying their story, is what survival really means. Maybe that's the last thing they gave me. Not guilt, but a job to finish. It was raining the day I visited the new memorial. Not a thunderstorm, just a soft desert rain that fell in straight lines, soaking into the dry soil like it had waited years for permission. The classified annex at Fort Danton had added something. Tucked in a quiet corridor beside the internal records archive, they'd mounted a polished steel slab, no bigger than a doorway. There was no flag, no announcement. Just a spotlight overhead and the faint smell of brass and stone. At the top, engraved in matte lettering. Task Force Redmark, Covenant Omega. Below, 5 names. And beneath those, etched smaller. Custodian, Captain L. Hale, Ret. For valor in silence. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but the tears had already come years ago in sandblasted tents and field hospitals and empty hotel rooms on the other side of the world. Instead, I placed a small box at the base of the memorial. Inside were 6 things. Riggins' radio pin. A page from Cho's notebook. A stone from Mendez's last outpost. A dog tag replica of Alvarez's ID. West cracked field compass. And my original Covenant badge. I stepped back and looked one last time. Not at the names, but at the empty space around them. At the silence they stood in. Then I turned and walked out. Not with closure. Not with peace. But with purpose. Because there are some stories the world doesn't get to hear. Some sacrifices that never make the evening news. But that doesn't mean they're forgotten. Not while I'm still breathing. Not while there's still one voice left to speak their names.